Welcome back, travelers. This is For Azeroth, the podcast all about Warcraft. I'm Garrett Weinzierl, and I am joined, as always, by Jocelyn Moffett. How goes the ever-long fight against the Legion for you this week, Jocelyn?
It's actually been really, really good. Took down the final boss of Karazhan over on Friday.
Nice.
And so it's going well. I'm coming for you, Gul'dan. Which
Again.
is, I really can't wait. We're poking at Nighthold tomorrow, so I'm excited.
That's going to be badass. Do you have room? No, you probably shouldn't bring me in there. Let's be honest. Well, that's totally awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I've just been, I keep doing this where I'm like, I'm gonna finally hit Exalted with everyone, and then I do a few days of it, and I'm just like, God, I hate rep grind. I hate it, but I want to fly. I want to fly, Jocelyn. I want to fly so bad. So I've been poking away at my freaking reputations again.
You don't have to be exalted with everyone, right? Though you only have to be revered.
I thought didn't you have to be exalted with the Nightfallen still for? Or is that that's for something else probably?
Exalted with the Nightfallen is for the Suramar questing. So you can't do the second phase, the Insurrection questline, which we're actually going to talk about later today. That's part of our lore section. But you can't do the Insurrection questline without being exalted first. Which I've now done on 2 tunes, and if I never do it again, I will be a happy camper.
Good God. It's awful. It's just awful. I'm sorry. I love Suramar. I think they've done just in looks and story, it's great. But man, I know I feel like, and my memory is so hazy now, I don't know what we talked about on For Azeroth versus what we talked about on Embrace of Spoilers. But I feel like at some point I played devil's advocate about the whole lock and lore behind certain things, and it's like, now I'm just with you. Past Garrett is an idiot, locking sweet ass lore behind the grindiest rep gate since I was trying to get my Scryer's Tabard in Shattrath and Burning Crusade, which turned 10 years over the weekend. I can see my mortality reaching me at a speed I am uncomfortable with. That was a lot to unpack. It's just awful, man. I can't believe you did it twice. I can't get it done once.
Yeah, and the unfortunate part about the Suramar storyline and why our episode of Embrace Spoilers for Suramar was not necessarily short, but neither one of us had completed it by the time we actually did the episode, was because the first part is, as Garrett mentioned, rep-gated, and then the second part is actually time-gated. So you got one quest line per week of somewhere between kind of 5 and 8 quests. And you had to work your way through, and you had to do week 1 before you could unlock week 2. And if you were actually doing it on time, like I did on my hunter, who was exalted at the beginning, my paladin became exalted kind of halfway through. So I've been going along with the storyline, but I don't know, it was they had this kind of artificial, you had to wait for the fruit to grow, and it grew once a week. So then you had to take the fruit and give it to somebody, and then you could continue on with your questing. So I mean, it had this artificial stop time gap thing in it, and I hate being halted by artificial means. It's the same reason why, and we're going to talk about this in our news segment, but the same reason why I fell off of archaeology is because they purposely time gated it. They said, yep, that was the intention, that was the mechanic for archaeology in this expansion, and I went, that was dumb.
Thank you for regressing to my level of really not eloquent opinions about things you don't like. I appreciate it. Hey.
Oh, I can articulate everything that I don't like about archaeology, but that would be an episode in and of itself. And it's really sad because it was my favorite profession, and now it is my least favorite profession. Even below Nomi. And that is saying something.
Well, it's a secondary profession, so at the end of the day. That's the fun thing about WoW, right? Is your fervorous anger about something that is important to you might be completely irrelevant to another player. Like me, I have never done archaeology. It has sounded terrible from the start, so I've never touched it. It's irrelevant. It has never once affected me, other than reading, taking 5 minutes out of my life to read about what it was, going, that sounds grindy, and moving on with my life.
It is quite grindy.
Yeah. Anyways, before we get into the news, talking about A, that 7.1.5 is here, and B, the massive dev Q&A that accompanied its coming to Azeroth, we have Fel Kitties to give away. We have been donated Fel Kitties by a very kind listener, and we weren't really sure how to give it away, but we needed to make a new Twitter account for this show since we've been lazy. 11 weeks later, still haven't had a
more than 11
account.
weeks too, because we took a break at Christmas. So
yeah, a 2-week break. So like 13 weeks. Math is hard. Anyways, if you would like a chance to win yourself a Fel Kitty pet, you can follow our Twitter account at FAZpodcast, FAZpodcast, and tweet us your favorite Warcraft character tagged with the with hashtag FelCatnip for a chance to win. Thanks again for the donation. Oh, you kind listener.
Who wished to remain anonymous. We're
Yes.
not being jerks and forgetting his name. He wished to remain anonymous. So
Yes.
Thank you very much for the donation. Because I have a Fel Kitty, because the Fel Kitties are the ones that you bought for charity. So that's the other thing. The proceeds from the Fel Kitties are actually going to charity, which is amazing.
So like
this
a
is
double
basically
thank
a
you.
charity donation from our listener, and you guys get awesome battle pets out of it. So this is just an all-around amazing giveaway. And the Fel Kitty's so cute.
And I might
I'm a
recommend
sucker for any of the kitties, though.
And I might recommend going and making, like, if you win one, go and donate something to Make-A-Wish. It'd be great. Double up on that donation. That'd be cool. So anyways, again, hashtag FelCatnip and tweet it to @FAZpodcast after you follow FAZpodcast. You should follow it anyway. If you like the show, that's where the updates will be. When things like, hey, we're taking a week or two off for the holidays, that stuff like that, and hey, we're coming back now. That information will be on that Twitter account. So, anywho, let's dive in. The dev Q&A was rather large. There's a lot to kind of unpack, and let's start with the Brawlers Guild fine-tuning, because we spent a good amount of time last week talking about the Brawlers Guild. They spoke a little more about it, saying, hey, yes, no, it's definitely endgame content. You're going to have to be 110 to do it. It is tuned statically, but it increases in difficulty, so there's no scaling going on within the Brawlers Guild.
That was one thing that a lot of people were kind of asking about. Like, if I go in at eye level 840, am I going to have the same experience as someone who goes in at, say, 860? And basically the response was, yes, you can either beat the boss or not. It has a set amount of, like, HP, set abilities, set damage, all the rest of it. So you can either beat it, yes or no. And you basically, if you can't, then it's on you to go and either get better gear, do what you have to do to kind of get up to the level of the boss. The bosses will not scale down to you, because it's meant to be very hard end game content, and it's meant to be like prestigious. Like, you can say I beat bosses 1 through 5, and I can say I beat bosses 1 through 7, and then there's a definite ranking there, and there's rewards based on that. So everything's set, no scaling, which makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's analogous to rating in that way. And, and PvP to a certain degree. It's always been, yes, skill can help you to a certain degree, but also to a certain degree, you just need gear. You just need to improve your character.
Exactly. And we should say, basically off the top, which is exactly the same that the dev Q&A said, is that there is no class design discussion. This is all about holidays, time walking, and professions in 7.1.5. There are hot fixes coming, and that means you hunters. And I know my hunter didn't feel so hot after 7.1.5. So there have been a lot of people complaining about the class balance and things that they've done in 7.1.5. So hot fixes are coming. And there is literally nothing about classes in this Q&A.
Nope, nothing at all. It's just kind of like, yes, we know it's a problem. Hotfixes are coming. Let's move on and talk about fun things like Brawlers Guild and whatnot.
Well, it's because of the dev that they actually had on the Q&A. Like, he's in charge of professions, so he's not going to talk about class design, because that would be silly.
But Jocelyn, I thought everyone at WoW worked on everything. That's why when a pet comes out and the first comment is, you should be fixing Warlock balance and not making pets, that it's a 100% valid and informed comment.
Yep, you're right.
I'm being facetious, of course. That's an idiotic comment. People have different jobs and specialize on the World of Warcraft development team. Stop making those comments. You're embarrassing us all. They said the first boss is supposed to be approachable. So there you go. If you're afraid, like I am, to go and do the Brawler's Guild, because I tried it once, and the first boss I played, I don't even remember when this was. I just remember dying horribly and being like, okay, I don't think this is for me. But yeah, also there's going to be no HP changes based on spec. There's just no scaling of any sort. Nothing changes. Everything is the same. It's binary. You will either be able to beat it or you will not. They said it's pretty much a DPS check. Also furthering on that, saying that healers are not meant to be good in a guild made for fighting, but don't worry, you get a micro holiday.
Yeah, that was the thing. They were like, oh, but just wait. The Zangarmarsh micro holiday is about healing the boss, so you guys are going to get a chance to shine. I was like, for a day. Screw you. Like, this is why people don't play healers. Like, you guys get a whole section of a game with rewards and mounts and super fun things, but healers, you get a micro holiday.
Okay,
Screw you.
If this was vanilla and dual spec wasn't a thing, or now even like whatever spec you ever want to be is relatively easy to swap in between of, I would agree with you. But it's so easy to be a different spec at this point. I mean,
to some extent, I will say yes. There is no class in the game that is specifically only a healer. Even priests, which have 2 healing specs, have 1 damage spec. So it's true that every class in the game can spec into DPS and can go do Brawler's Guild. But it does mean that extra step of work, right? Like, you have to acquire your DPS artifact, you have to level it up to the point where you have, 850 plus gear and your full artifact traits, which isn't easy. So yeah, I I felt like that was just a little bit of almost a jab at healers. Like, we made this whole big thing for DPS, but you get a micro holiday. It's like, dudes. Like, it would have been better just to say nothing. Just to say, this is our thing for DPS.
Fair enough. But I don't know. When I start getting as quick of a queue for you for anything else in the entire game, maybe then I'll understand your pain. So, let's move on and talk about time walking. They talked a bit about it. They said that an eye level bump is being talked about. Okay, cool.
Well, it makes sense because the next thing they followed that up with is that everything else is going up, so it makes sense to bump time walking because the eye level increase is coming to Legion dungeons in 7.2, so it makes sense to bump everything else up because right now time walking gear starts at 830, so it's even below the baseline for World Quest. So they just basically said, yep, we're probably going to bump it up, so keep an eye on for that, but it'll be 7.2 when that happens. So yeah. They also mentioned Sholomance because a lot of people have apparently been asking why that isn't included in time walking. And it kind of opened up this whole conversation about vanilla time walking in general. But basically they said it was a revamped dungeon in Mists of Pandaria. But since it's not actually Pandaren, they wanted to stick with the theme for Pandaren time walking of, Pandaria. So that totally makes sense to me. But the point that they brought up about vanilla time walking is basically that vanilla dungeons aren't tuned properly for the way that the game plays now. So for instance, the example that they gave is that they're actually tuned for warrior tanks who couldn't wear plate. So, that it just doesn't scale the same way. It would basically mean a lot of work and big redesigns for a lot of those dungeons. So it's not that it's not happening. It's just that they chose to start with Burning Crusade because they had a lot of newer systems in Burning Crusade moving forward. So the amount of work was smaller. But vanilla time walking is on the table. They think it'd be really cool. And a lot of people obviously have crazy levels of nostalgia for vanilla. So look for those vanilla dungeons at some point soon, TM.
I would love that, personally. I completely forgot that, is it Sholomance? I always called it Skolomance. But
I'm probably saying it wrong.
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I'm reading this afterwards. I didn't actually listen to them say it on the live stream, so for all I know, I've been pronouncing it wrong forever. It's fake words. Anyways, I had completely forgot that it was revamped in Mists of Pandaria. I remember running the revamp many times. I completely forgot that it was around the time of Mists.
And this is the dungeon that you run, because I've only done it like at max level, so I've just kind of blown through it on my own. So this is the one that is that the Headless Horseman, the Halloween event takes place in that graveyard.
No, that's the Scarlet Monastery.
Oh, Scarlet Monastery. Okay, I get them confused. Because again, when you're just blowing through it, like there's not a whole lot of stuff that actually like stands out.
Oh, I thought back in the day, Sholo was like, I thought super cool because I mean, also it was like the closest thing we're getting to like references to Arthas back in the day because it was out in the Plague Lands and all that jazz, and it was high level content and vanilla, and it was super spooky. Even though you go back now and you're like, these look like cartoon bones, these are ridiculous looking, but at the time I thought it was really cool.
So the other thing that people were kind of asking about was separating time walking from other events. So people tend to have a really, really good time in time walking. They want it to come up more often. And basically they said like now adding another week, another quest with Pandaren and time walking, it basically puts more time between your favorite events. And the counterpoint brought up by the devs was, yeah, but it also puts more time between you and your least favorite event. So for instance, a lot of people don't enjoy the arena weekly quest. So that means that, you know, where it would have been once every 8 weeks, now it's once every 9 weeks. So once every 9 weeks, you don't get a reward when you just totally ignore the arena quest. So it's got some give and takes there. And now adding another time walking event basically means that, you know, every 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to get some sort of time walking, whether it's Burning Crusade, Lich King, Kata, Pandaren, whatever. We now have 4 chances to have time walking. So they said basically being rare makes it more special. So they have no plans to pull it out into its own event. As much as having time walking available all the time would be super cool, it also means that you can say like, this week is my time walking week and I love Burning Crusade, so I'm just going to do nothing but time walking this week. So you don't have that experience if it's available all the time.
Yeah, I really enjoy time walking, but I like how rare it is, right? Mm-hmm. I'm with the devs here. I think having it a regular does make it feel special. And if I could just time walk all the time, man, I would just kind of kill it. I'd be like, oh.
I agree. It would be one of those things that I just didn't think about doing as often, you know, like where I actually like will set aside an evening and I will do time walking. I'll get my 5 done and then I'll help run other people through it. And, you know, like I spend an evening time walking once every few weeks as opposed to, you know, like having it be there all the time. And then I just be like, it's only 830 gear. So, you know, I kind of want to grind for that currency because they have really cool mounts, but at the same time, I got other stuff to do. So I feel like that this is, keeping it rare does actually make it special to me. So I can see how that's a good argument.
For me, it's at the perfect level of urgency, like of need to do it. Like I don't feel extremely compelled to grind for the rewards, but I enjoy the experience enough that when it does come around and because there is so much time that I get excited again. I'm like, just lather on that nostalgia. Let's do it. Roll around
and speaking of things that people have a lot of nostalgia for and are really excited about, that time walking is kind of brought up is the idea of raid time walking, because obviously they have created all kinds of dungeons now. They've gone basically all the way up to, they said they like to keep it a couple expansions behind, so we're not going to see Warlords time walking, thank God, before we see the next expansion. That was like my least favorite dungeons were Warlords, but so basically, people are asking, well, can we, you know, raid Black Temple in a time walking fashion? Which basically they said they've talked about it. It's a safe bet and it's a really cool idea. It's on the list of things they'd like to do. So they have to basically have the same sort of tech hurdles that they have with the vanilla dungeons with some of the raids. But now that they have the scaling technology and stuff, where they might have to rebuild things, they at least have the technology to do it now. So it's definitely on the list, something to watch for in the future. Definitely not like a 7.2 feature, but in the future, yes, it is something they like to do. So I think that's so cool because as someone who didn't raid until basically like midway through Warlords, I would really like this.
I think that would be wicked cool. I would be so into that. And you know, also, it'd be a really cool thing to roll out, you know, when the current raid tier is getting long in the tooth. Mm-hmm. Especially if they brought up the drops to, you know, maybe not quite the quality of the current raid level, but maybe an eye level or 2 underneath. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be really sweet. I mean, transmog's already a thing. I think transmog's been a wild success. This would be just one more thing that kind of tied into that as well. It's like, well, sweet. I'm gonna get the looks that I'm trying to find, but it also might fill in one of those slots that I'm just getting horribly unlucky finding a drop for.
Well, exactly, and especially where they have like everything having the chance to roll Warforged or Titanforged, even if they started stuff at say 845 or 850, where the current raid tiers are, approaching 900, you always have the chance to roll higher. So, like you say, there would be a chance to, after running these raids, you'd have a chance to actually get legitimate gear. So I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. I mean, they'd have to. There's a lot of hurdles there, right? Like they mentioned hurdles. Yeah. I can already think of a few. Like, what do you do with set bonuses? I'm assuming get rid of them because there's some set bonuses that would probably just not work, and others that might break the game in certain ways. But that'd be sweet. Bring it. I'm all in. Let's do this.
So they also talked a little bit about like moving away from time walking. They talked a little bit about specifically the tomes on the auction house that you use to change your talents. So basically the mats are really, really expensive. And so they're looking at a way to adjust the cost, because these are the tomes that everyone got, I think, 5 of at the start of the expansion. And I don't know about you, but all mine are gone. So they're basically looking for ways to adjust the cost, because they do agree that the talent tomes are too expensive. So that's something that they are aware of and they're working on. Something else that they're aware of and they are working on is Obliterum. So we know that in 7.1.5, they actually did roll it out where you can upgrade 10 times instead of just 8. So that bumps up the crafted gear to 865. But specifically, people were asking if the kind of the part of the quest line, if you haven't already done it, there's a part of the quest line where you have to actually get the wrists from blacksmith, 2 from leatherworking, 1 from tailoring. So the question basically came up, did having to get 1 of each of those wrist types actually hit the mark? Did it do what it wanted it to do? Because a lot of people are saying, that's a hell of a lot of work. It's really expensive. I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, yes, actually, that was exactly what we wanted to happen, because apparently a lot of them were just straight up 1-for-1 traded, which was a huge social win for them, which is also something I think that a lot of people complain about with Warcraft, is basically that it's lost a lot of its social aspect. And I think they made a lot of positive steps towards bringing that social aspect back to it. And this was one of the ways that, I saw tons and tons and tons of talk in trade chat in the first week or 2 of the expansion, saying like, okay, I'm a tailor, I can make the imbued silkweave bracers, anyone want to trade? And there was all kinds of people that were doing those 1-for-1 trades. So I think it was a great experiment in the first week.
Yeah, I think it could go longer than a week. Obviously they've gone much longer than a week, but they even brought that up, right? Saying that it kind of doesn't work now as long as it's been. There's not really any trading going on anymore. I mean, I'm sure you have your kind of edge cases where people are still trading. They happen to find each other, like the one tailor that just happened to get to this part of the quest that day, and the one blacksmith that just happened to get the quest that day managed to find each other, and that's how true love actually works. But for the most part, now it is just an obnoxious hurdle to get over. But I mean, this is one of those things I find kind of like a minor gripe. Is like, what do you really do? How can you? It's hard to do this type of social engineering, right? Like, how can you really estimate how long the tail is going to be on something like this? I think I would rather err on the side of what they did, and it just kind of becoming harder for folks coming back later into Legion than to not have that experience at all. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the thing. It was very much built in the first couple of weeks as a super awesome social experiment and a big win for them, I think. And the reason why I think it didn't last longer and it's not still going on is because the Obliterum Forge just never really panned out as something that, could make a lot of money or that a lot of people used. Like the amount of effort that went into things like dungeons and world quests was much more rewarding, much faster than the Obliterum Forge was. So a little bit later on in the Q&A, they actually talked about re-rolling secondary stats on gear, and they were saying, you have to put in so much effort to get the materials for things, and then you craft the gear, and then with secondary stats being so heavily weighted, although that has now changed. But with secondary stats still being important, is there going to be a chance to re-roll those? And basically they said no. The mat costs in Legion are actually a lot lower than they have been in the past, because the idea was you make a whole bunch of pieces of gear. You keep the one that rolls the stats that you need, you throw the rest in the forge, and then you use that obliterum to upgrade your gear. So it was very much designed this way to basically make a whole bunch of pieces of gear and then have a way to kind of make use of those even if they were the wrong secondary stats. So just basically the whole obliterum thing in general fell flat on its face, just because it was a huge time sink, because you were, gathering mats and, doing all the crafting and stuff in order to make that work. And then the cap on it was lower than some of the stuff on the World Quest. So it was just, it didn't make a lot of sense. So I think it was obliterum in general that fell on its face, not this specific quest line. I think that this quest was cool. And I remember, like, I was the leather worker in the first week of the expansion. And so I did a lot of crafting of the bracers, because I could actually make two. So I made a whole bunch for the guild, and we did a lot of trading and gave a lot away just to let people get their forges. And then we all kind of went, oh, we don't actually need these. The only reason to do this quest line is to get rid of this burning wagon in the middle of Dalaran.
And honestly, I missed the burning wagon, and now I just have the coolest looking, most boring thing in the game, the Obliterum Forge. There's a discussion, I think, with Obliterum to the given, the kind of the push and pull, right? Like the reward for the boring. Like this has always been a thing, like in WoW for me. It's like there's a ton of things to do that I think are just great and fun, and I want to do them. And it doesn't feel like a chore. And then there are other things that are grindy in a sense, in a way that I don't enjoy them. I just consider them boring, but sometimes I will go and do them anyway because the reward is worth it. And the Obliterum Forge, I think, just fails on that account entirely. It's horrendously boring. It feels punishing. There's something that feels bad, right? I think there's something that feels inherently bad of having to gather that many mats, create that many things, and then just destroy them. Mm-hmm. I understand. Sorry.
It's not even necessarily the destruction. It's that when you destroy it, the reward for it is so small. So there's kind of two tiers of crafted gear. There's the stuff that you get at first. So for instance, on my tailor, I got a whole bunch of silkweave stuff. And then after I progressed further in my quest line, then I got a second set of recipes for imbued silkweave stuff. And then so for the first tier of things, you're getting, I think, like 5 to 10 obliterum. So the plain silkweave stuff, when you throw it in, you get a random amount from 5 to 10. I think it's been a long time since I've obliterated anything. And then for the secondary stuff, the imbued things, you get something like 20 to 25, which means that you still have to take on average 4 to 5 like second level stuff in order to get 100 obliterum, I think, ash, to combine it to make a shard to then upgrade your gear. So when you're getting rid of 4 to 5 pieces of second tier gear in order to get 5 eye levels on the piece that you're wearing, it's just it's not rewarding enough. It's too much. Even like if it was, I think, like 2 to 3 upper levels of gear, it might have been something that I did, but it was way too much of an investment to upgrade anything. And they basically said, like, yeah, we know it's a huge investment to do that quest line. It's a huge investment to do in Obliterum in general. It's not that rewarding. But they did go on to say that, there are people who are still doing Obliterum, who are still selling it on the auction house. And basically, if you want Obliterum, you can still buy it on the auction house without the forge. And it's probably a better investment for you. I was like, yeah, probably.
Yeah. So I would just mark this up as a failed experiment, personally.
Yeah.
Please don't bring this back in the next expansion. Let's move directly into the opposite of Obliterum, which is something I'm actually excited about, the mention of leveling micro-holidays. So 1 to 2 day events where everyone is leveling together. How are they going to incentivize this? Because they said that there's not really, like, anything else. They said the reward for the micro-holiday is meant to be the experience, because they are missable. So, like, I I'm excited about this. I love the idea of finding a way to get folks back in the old world, back leveling together. But if the reward is the experience, then what is the experience? Like, how is it a micro holiday other than, hey, these 2 days, you guys should go level together. I mean it. Go.
Oh, they meant in general. So the reward for micro holidays overall, the reason that there aren't any mounts or pets or titles or any of the other kind of larger rewards for things like Winter Veil or, like any of that kind of stuff. The reason that they are micro holidays is because, if it falls on a Tuesday, it's really easy for people to miss. And so they didn't want people to feel like they had to log in during that one day during the year in order to get, say, a mount. It feels bad for more people than it would feel good for, and that's not an experience they want to create. So I know it's confusing because they're talking about the experience and we're versus like XP. So
gotcha.
We're talking about the experience, like the you going there and doing something and having the experience is what they want the micro holidays to, how they want them to reward you. So then they were saying that the idea of having a 1 to 2 day event where the reward is XP is a really, really great idea. And this reminded me a lot of Invasions because, like you would see these big, huge crowds of people and it had their problems. And there were some people that just farmed it by parking a character there and they didn't actually do anything. And that was kind of crappy.
I did that, except I assisted, I damaged things because it was, that's how you still had to tag mobs to get XP. So
yeah. But yeah, so basically the idea reminded me of Invasions because those are really cool experiences. Going to different places in the old world that you don't necessarily visit all the time and having a whole bunch of people being there and everybody working to kill bosses and stuff was really, really cool. So basically same sort of idea, but 1 to 2 day events. And the idea then being that there's like a boost to XP in those zones or something, and everyone can, have these scaling mobs and stuff. And they said that sounds like a great idea. They really want to do it. And they did point out that some of the micro holidays, like the one coming this weekend, which is Call of the Scarab, which we mentioned last week, it's the AQ Remembrance Day. I use air quotes because it's not actually called that. It's called Call of the Scarab, but you guys probably know it as AQ Remembrance Day, is actually happening, I think, the 22nd, 23rd.
Yeah, it starts
January.
Starts this Saturday, just in time for me to leave for a wedding.
Perfect.
Yep.
See, so very missable. So that's feels kind of bad, man, right?
It does feel bad. I'm so excited for this. I want to go do this.
So what if it had a mount tied to it too? Then you'd be like, damn it.
Oh, yeah. I believe it runs through Monday, though. So when we get home Sunday night, I might jump on and I'll still have a chance to experience it a little bit, maybe.
But they were saying specifically Call of the Scarab can be done as low as 55 because it takes place in Silithus, I think. So basically, all the things that you have to do for the micro holiday are actually worth a whole lot more XP than they normally would be. So there's boosts kind of built into doing these things on the micro holidays. So you can be a lower level character and then kind of get the boost because you're surrounded by level 110 guys, right? So you just have to kind of like group up and tag mobs and just kind of farm your XP during these micro holidays. So it is possible, but they said they really like the idea of creating specific micro holidays for leveling, and it's something they're looking at doing in the future.
Yeah. Also, back to the idea of leveling holidays, because I love this idea so damn much. And you hearkened it. I like that you use the Legion invasions as an example, because I think there's a way you could gamify that, right? Like, because think of the Legion invasions, like they would pop up and we'd finish it. Where's the next one? Mount up, fly over to it. It'd be cool to do that in like the leveling zones, and imagine if like it just cycled through the zones in the order you were kind of incentivized to level through them originally. I don't know what the heck you would call it or whatever, but I don't know, like whatever think of each zone. There's usually like a faction or two that you're always fighting. Mm-hmm. What if they got super pissed off and they were like invading the towns and stuff? So you, I don't know, you go to Dark Shore and it's Naga. And they're attacking the towns or whatever. So it's like, all right, everyone over the Dark Shore. And there's like a way even for low-level people to move quickly between them. I don't know whether it's portals or you just make flight paths open that day or something. But that would be really cool.
I agree. I totally had another idea. Now it's like slipped my mind. Oh, I know what I was going to say. It would be really, really neat if somehow you were able to like visit locations that otherwise you would never be able to go to. So specifically, I'm thinking like starting zones. What if there was like some sort of a crisis on the Wandering Isle or something? And so everyone got the chance to go to the Pandaren starting zone and help out with the crisis there. And then so you'd have like a whole bunch of 110 characters, or all different levels, but a whole bunch of high level characters in these starting zones. So first of all, people who had never done those races would be able to see those locations, and that could be pretty cool. But then also you could potentially have people who are just starting the game, who are at level like between 1 and 10, seeing all of these super cool like transmogged, like all these different races, and like I think that could be such a cool experience for old and new players alike.
You clearly have never started a new character and been there when the level 100 comes and one-shots all your quest mobs.
No.
Okay. It's not the best feeling in the world, but maybe there's a scaling thing there that could help everything. I don't know.
I was going to say, yeah, maybe there's something there that could happen. But I just think having access to places that you normally wouldn't be able to, because even Pandaren, once they leave the Wandering Isle, they can't go back. So, like I think just having access to some of those places would be really cool.
Yep. All right, well, let's move into professions, of which there was just a ton of talk about professions. So much talk, and I'm not even sure I want to go through all of this, because at some point I want to craft myself a pillow. But they said that they want to keep things coming for crafters, to keep things relevant. They admitted that blacksmiths, tailors, leatherworkers, etc., all that kind of gear does have a shelf life, even with the updates in 7.1.5, so you can make them higher item level. And I guess hints that we're getting new recipes in 7.2.
Well, we got new stuff even in 7.1.5. There were some things for enchanters, some things for blacksmiths, some things for engineers. So there were some changes and things. And also they did mention that Nomi he's slowly getting better. So, there have been updates so far in 7.1 and then 7.1.5. So that's going to continue on into 7.2. We talked a little bit earlier about re-rolling the secondary stats. And basically the question was, why are stats random in the first place? Because mats are so hard to get. And very specifically, this was about the new engineering headgear that they can craft. So they can actually craft a headpiece for, I believe it's anyone. I believe it's plate, mail, leather, and cloth. But basically they're item level 880, which is huge. And so the idea is that the glass that you get drops out of a bag that you get from a shoulder enchant. So as you're killing mobs, about once an hour, you should get a drop that has a bag of engineering supplies. And then that bag of engineering supplies has a chance to contain the glass, and you need 6 pieces of glass in order to make these 880 goggles. So it's quite difficult to actually craft these. And basically they said, it needs to be hard to get. They're 880. And then they proceeded to say you can trade or sell in the auction house if they don't roll the stats that you need. So basically just be more open to in-game systems as they currently exist.
Yeah. If it's hard to get and you're still dealing with random stats, man, good. It's awful. I'm making kobold noises. I think that's what the noise I just made.
It sounded very kobold-y.
Yeah, jeez, man. I'm down. I get it. I will defend you to the end of the earth on your random random stat rolls, guys, but not when it's like this big of a pain in the butt to craft something.
Yeah, and basically they said, because the glass is also tradable, so you can buy the mats on the auction house, but then the conversation was, well, but they're so freaking expensive. And basically they had a whole big conversation about how time needs to factor in somehow, and it factors in by gathered materials. They cost more because people are actually having to do it now. They've gone through and they've done a lot of bans on accounts that were using bots to do the farming. Plus, we no longer have a readily available. We do have the Blood of Sargeras vendor, but you still have to farm the Blood of Sargeras. So there's still a time investment there. So your gathered materials are costing more in this expansion because they're actually taking people's time. So the supply is much, much lower than it has been previously. So they are saying that, yeah, it's I guess working as intended, that if you have to put in a lot of time to gather these materials, then they should cost a lot. But then I think the problem is that then people don't have the money to buy the crafted item at the end. So then people are saying, okay, well, I can't sell this for what it's worth, so I'm going to sell it for half what it's worth just so I can actually sell it. And then you're getting this situation, which is the auction house right now, where the materials cost more than the final crafted item. And they said, it's a delicate balance there because it doesn't actually take any time to click the button to say craft. Right? Like if you have 2 crafting professions as opposed to a gathering profession, then you're sitting there just pushing the craft button and you're turning 100 silk into, pants, and you haven't actually done anything. There is 7 seconds to craft.
I disagree with that. There is a trade-off there though, because if you don't have a gathering profession, you're buying it with money and you're investing time to gain gold to buy the mats with gold.
Well, yes, but that's basically what they were saying, is that if the mats are cheaper than the final crafted thing, then everyone's going to want to have crafting professions, not gathering professions. And then so there's the ebb and flow, right? So right now we're just in a period where not enough people are gathering because it's a time investment, as opposed to kind of the set it and forget it way that it was with garrisons previously. Like you actually have to go out and find those nodes, which you didn't have to do before.
But then there's also the issue of of alchemy and jewel crafting, which you need to sell because players need items from those crafting professions. So those are crafting professions that have always been profitable. Alchemy especially, like to a ridiculous level. And that's where I think it gets hazy. And I'm surprised there wasn't really any discussion here about that. Like, yeah, the randomness is fine, and I get it, and I understand the World of Warcraft teams, like, what they were trying to accomplish there, but when you also have a crafting profession like alchemy where there is no randomness involved in flasks, and flasks are a hot commodity that makes that crafting profession a ton of gold, well then it's not even, it's not equal, and it just makes me feel like, why did I ever go blacksmithing? It seems pointless.
Well, and that's kind of the really the overall problem that they have right now, is that the professions that are made to craft gear are kind of, they feel bad because of the obliterum system, because of, just gear in general, and because of the shelf life and all the other things that we've talked about today. Those specific blacksmith, tailoring, and leatherworking don't feel so great. And even tailors, because I switched to I have tailoring on my paladin. And I got super, super excited because I was like, okay, I killed the final boss in Karazhan. Like, this thing was a freaking raid. It was difficult. I'm so excited. I got back and I turned to my quest and found out that the super amazing bag that I can create is the same size as the freaking one from Draenor that I already had. They're both 30 slot bags. I'm like, WTF. There's literally nothing I can do, even though I beat the 5-man raid. Like, so the trade-off there for those professions is basically they haven't been given enough extra things, although blacksmiths can make relics. But leatherwork I dropped on my hunter for the first time ever. Tailoring, I'm just kind of like, what do I even do with this now? But then there's the professions like jewel crafting and alchemy and enchanting and inscription that have a direct impact on your gameplay. Those are the things that you need in order to raid. Those are the things that you need to do higher level content, including PvP. They have direct impacts on the game the way that gear doesn't anymore at this point in an expansion, which is still very early in an expansion. You're, within the first few months of release, and 3 of your primary professions don't really do anything anymore. So it is, but they're aware, and they're going to be doing more stuff in 7.2. But it's a delicate balance for them in professions. Yeah, because they don't necessarily want to make professions more rewarding than, say, dungeons and world quests and raids. So it's hard to make it relevant but not overpowering.
Correct. Maybe give all of those crafting professions at least one piece of gear at 880. That's a small bone you could throw us, and would actually make me want to go spend any time at all with my blacksmith.
But I mean, like, if you could make it, hard to get mounts or pets, or like, there's all kinds of stuff
which have been things in the past.
Yes, they have done in the past, yeah. But there's all kinds of extra kind of cosmetic stuff that you could give these classes, or like if for instance the blacksmithing. I think shoulders for my paladin. I think it's like the shoulders and the breastplate look freaking sweet. So if you give them super awesome like transmog pieces, then that's something else you could do, right? But even then, with transmog being what it is now, with the collections and account wide stuff and everything else, like you only have to buy that piece once and then you've got it. So if you're not big into like, you very quickly kind of flood that market, right? So.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's still better than I think what we currently have, right? There's an active economy for things like jewel crafting, for things like alchemy. There really isn't for blacksmith, and even though something like that would have a shelf life because eventually most people would have it, it's still better than right now, like you said. Where I mean, why would you buy gear? There's just really no point.
Yeah.
So, anywho, what's happening? What's happening with skinning, Jocelyn? I know you've been so happy with it.
So I dropped skinning, but basically they said, skinning didn't get a lot of the quality life improvements that herbalism and mining got. So basically, nodes for those other two professions are now multi-tappable, which means like more than one person can gather the same herb. So it's actually a little bit more friendly. It's not so much of a race anymore. There's still a time limit on those, like from the time the first person taps it to the time it disappears. But it is at least possible for more than one person to gather from the same node. But they basically said we didn't get those quality of life improvements because skinning is different because you basically make your own gathering nodes. So if you can find a location where there's a set of, say, like 10 bears, you can just kill those bears over and over as they respawn, and you've got this teeny tiny little like place where you can farm. And mining and herbalism don't have those. So skinning is its own beast, but they are going to try to make some quality of life changes, basically because of you can. If you're the same faction, you can multi-tag mobs now, which means that even if you're not grouped, then if the other person who tagged the mob doesn't loot it, you can't skin it. So that's, that is one thing that they say is kind of crappy. So they're going to fix it. So they have to figure out how to fix it without making the other person lose their loot. And then the in-game mechanic for that right now is basically getting your stuff mailed to you when you fail to loot a mob. So they don't really want to do that either because that would really clog the mail system, because a lot of people are just like, I don't need that broken tooth, and they leave it. So yeah, they have to figure out a way around it, but it is something they're thinking about. So if anyone is still skinning, I'm sorry.
I never really thought about that, making its own nodes. Like back in the day, killing mobs that were worth skinning could take a while, but man, it is pretty easy for me to clear out just about a pack of anything at this point in Legion. So that'd be great. I would love if I could just, aggro a bunch of mining nodes and beat the crap out of them, and then just ting, 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 ting. I guess I kind of can with like basilisks and stuff in this expansion, but the rate at which they actually yield ore that's worth a darn is pretty low.
Yeah. So yeah, skinning is its own thing, and they're looking at fixing it, but nothing concrete yet, but probably 7.2, but that's still a ways off. So they also talked a little bit about cooking and Nomi, and basically the question was like, why
Nomi?
Did you make all of these recipes basically RNG research? And so basically what happens is you give Nomi an ingredient, and then you say, here's a bunch of the ingredient buys you the work orders, and then the work orders spit out usually burnt food on the other end, but occasionally a recipe that uses that ingredient. So they basically wanted professions, including secondary professions, in this expansion to be their own content. So primary professions all got quest lines, and secondary professions, they didn't want to kind of overwhelm us with more. Can you imagine if you had 4 quest lines on top of your other 2 quest lines on top of your main story on top of? Yeah, so they didn't want to do quest lines, so thank you for that. So what they did was they gave each secondary profession its own thing that you do in order to max it out. So archaeology got time gating, which was a stupid decision. Fishing got an artifact. First aid was the random quests that pop up every once in a while to go and help explorers. And then cooking was work orders. So they said in retrospect at the beginning, yes, absolutely, it was too random, but they said it's basically right now too hard to push for a specific recipe. So if I need a specific recipe and I need a 3-star version, I am going to have to throw so many materials into Nomi that it's better to just buy it on the auction house from somebody who just had the luck. So they said that's not how they want it to work, but Nomi is getting better with every patch. So his chance to get recipes has gone up significantly now in 7.1.5. So if it's something that you kind of dropped off of, which I know I did, I was really into cooking for the first couple of weeks until I poured everything I had into Nomi and got nothing, and then just went, all right, fine, that's it. Because even the trash food, like the burnt food, wasn't worth a lot to sell to a vendor. So yeah, now he's making better trash, and he has a higher chance to give you actual recipes. So they said if you have left cooking behind, now is the time to actually go back in and give Nomi another shot. He deserves it, guys.
I kind of like the idea of Nomi at its core, and I don't so much mind the randomness because I think cooking is innocuous enough that it's not like the randomness of legendaries where I'm just like you're in your war against min-maxing, you have made a grave error. Is how I feel in some cases. Random stats and the randomness of legendaries, I think it's just wrong. It's a screw up. It's a failed experiment. With Nomi though, I personally, and maybe this is, I might be biased because I was never huge into cooking. I was kind of used to getting it from my raid mates anyway. But
you heard it here first, guys. Garrett's a big mooch.
I pay you if you let me. Kyle finally started letting me pay him for his darn flasks. But I actually did this. This is the first time in forever I've ever actively engaged in cooking in any way, shape, or form, because it was just like, oh, I'm going to go visit Nomi. I'm going to go into the inn, and I'm going to walk into the back and give him my food, and I'll come back later. I'll pick up a bunch of bird food and some random thing that I'll learn, and I'll sell my bird food and move on with my life, and it was fine. It wasn't something I was actively thinking about. I was just kind of partaking in it passively.
Well, yeah, because it gave you something to do, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
it was also, yeah, it was easy to kind of do, easy to wrap your head around. I thought it was a cool implementation of work orders. I think he just wasn't rewarding enough at the beginning of the expansion, and a lot of people got angry about wasting their materials, basically.
Yeah, which I completely understand. So so what I'm saying is I like the concept, and it sounds like I am all on board for the changes that they have made.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I mean, it is something that they said as early as BlizzCon that Nomi was going to get better every patch because he's new to cooking in Legion, so he's learning alongside the rest of us. So that was kind of the flavor of his character.
I like that you dug into that pun. You completely missed your own pun about skinning as its own beast.
I did totally miss that.
You just powered past that pun earlier. Yeah. Also, by the way, I will admit in my bias that I loved the Nomi memes that came out of everyone's hatred of this poor Pandaren. I loved it. Every meme I saw of him on a cooking show getting berated, loved it.
Yeah, I saw a whole bunch too about since he burns so many things, clearly he's actually working for the Burning Legion.
Yes. Yes.
Oh man, so many good jokes.
Yeah, or he's the new avatar of Ragnaros.
Yep.
This is just Ragnaros hanging out in Dalaran.
Oh man, so many good jokes. So speaking of 3-star recipes and how difficult they are to get, some of them are actually behind rated battlegrounds, at which point a lot of people are like, WTF, this isn't just forcing me to PvP, this is forcing me to do rated PvP, which is that one step even further. And come on, why are you doing this to me, Blizzard? Turns out a lot of people really don't like PvP, which makes me sad, but... So basically they said that obviously star ranks are new to Legion, and they kind of erred on the side of caution with star recipes and made the 3-star recipes quite rare in some cases because it's easier to make things more readily available than it is to make them readily available and then suddenly harder to get, because you've built up the expectation that if I go find this rare mob, it will drop this recipe. And if all of a sudden he only drops the recipe half the time, then people are going to get upset. So it's easier to say he drops it half the time and then, we're going to up that percentage to 75% of the time. People are much happier with that kind of a change. So they erred on the side of rarity. And they added rated battlegrounds in because they wanted people to, first of all, they wanted to make that specific recipe and other recipes like it basically like the most rare in the game. And they wanted to introduce people to new parts of World of Warcraft. So a lot of people aren't doing rated battlegrounds, so they thought this would be a nice way to, if you want that 3-star recipe, which isn't actually required in any way, shape, or form, then you would have to go and you'd have to do the activity that was tied to that you wouldn't have tried otherwise. So really, they put the call out actually in this part of the Q&A and said they want to specifically hear from people who went out of their way to do the rated battlegrounds and to acquire the recipe because they want to know if it was worth it and if you actually feel pride from doing it. So the fact that you have the 3-star recipe, is that something that you talk about? Do you care at all? Did you get it and go meh and then just kind of move on? Because they want it to be something like, you know, I'm the only one on my server to have this recipe, like I am amazing. That's the feeling they want to give people. So if you've got it and you're not getting that feeling, then obviously they failed and they won't do it again. So they specifically want to hear from people who did things that they wouldn't normally do, like rated battlegrounds, in order to get a 3-star recipe in their profession. And they want your feedback. So anyone listening to the sound of my voice, go tweet at Warcraft devs and tell them, yes, I have my recipe. Yes, PvP is awesome. Or whatever your feedback is.
I have always preferred offering multiple ways to accomplish the same goal in World of Warcraft, and they have seemed to move further and further away from it.
Well, the thing is, specifically with these recipes, is that you will still, like in some cases, you use the same amount of mats all the way through. So for alchemy, you're always using the same amount of stuff. But your recipe goes from like giving you 3 to giving you 5 to giving you 7. So, you know, it technically costs a little bit less. And then in other cases, it actually literally does. Like you still get your 1 piece of gear, but it takes 10 pieces of silk instead of 15 pieces of silk. So it's basically like a reduction in mats in one way or another. And yeah, so but you don't necessarily have to have that 3-star recipe. You could go and farm that extra 5 pieces of silk instead of farming your 3-star recipe. So it's kind of a choice of time sink. And at what point does your choice to gather as opposed to, you know, go and find the recipe, like where is that break even point? And at what point do you actually go for that recipe? Do you think it's something you're going to be doing often enough that you need to invest the time to get that recipe? So, you know, it's all a trade-off. And in the end, it's all how you choose to play Warcraft. If crafting's super important to you, maybe you spend an afternoon PvPing.
Well said.
But you don't have to.
Well, there's still a lot about professions, but anything you would really like to highlight before we move on to lore?
I think probably the biggest thing, and I say biggest thing only because it's something that gets talked about with every expansion, is the idea of making gathering professions and crafting professions different slots. And basically they said, yes, we talk about it every expansion. It's been a suggestion for a really long time. They're aware of it. But they don't necessarily want to force people who are doing either 2 gathering or 2 crafting into one of each, because the lore of your character and the way you've been playing for the last, 10 to 12 years is something they really don't want to mess with. So then you open it up to potentially having a 3rd slot, and that has a ton of downsides too, because your character is less focused, less thematic. And it also steps on gatherers a little. If you've spent, a whole ton of time being just a miner and an herbalist, and then all of a sudden everyone can gather, then it kind of cheapens that character as well. So they haven't kind of settled on a way that they could change it and still make everyone enjoy their characters and enjoy their professions. So they've, each expansion it's come up, and each expansion they've kind of gone, we kind of think that it's good the way it is. So they're actually more interested in improving existing professions and doing things like making it easier to switch in between them, which they have done specifically in Legion. You can actually buy a book from your trainer that you can relearn all of the recipes that you learned from questing. So you don't have to redo your whole big long quest line again if you switch out of and then back to a profession, which is awesome. But right now there are things like legacy recipes, which actually I lost one when I switched out of leatherworking, which was kind of crappy. But basically recipes that are no longer available in game. If you currently switch out of, say, leatherworking or blacksmithing or whatever, then you just lose the ability to craft that and you can never get it back. So they're more interested in making it so you don't lose recipes when switching than they are opening up new slots.
I like the way it is. I would just like them to make all of the crafting professions interesting and give us some cool epic stuff. So I actually want to keep it.
I agree.
I liked the olden days where you were grossly punished for dropping a profession. I think that's how it should stay. I like the RP aspect of this is my profession. You know, Spartans, what is your profession? You know, stuff like that. There you go. That's how it should be. Shouldn't change your profession. I don't like it. It should be hard and punishing if you swap. But right now I'm just feeling punished for staying.
That's obviously a very valid, opinion as well. So, I mean, that's always, again, you're on the RP side of professions. So they're taking that into account, I think, more than almost anything else. So more than quality of life or making it a less social experience, because right now you need to use trade chat or auction house or whatever to kind of, or a guild. Like, I mean, we do it in AIE all the time where, you're training like, oh, I have a tailor and you need a bag here, have 5 bags and go about your business. And so they're more encouraging the RP and social aspects of it, which I think is great. I'd rather see that than me like be my own everything. That's not fun in a game that's meant to be played with other people.
Yeah, no, I don't exactly. I don't think that's how it should be. So let's more of that, please. More of that.
Yes.
So, all right.
Yeah. So that was most of 715 Q&A.
Yeah. So too much.
It was dense.
Too much profession talk for my blood, personally.
Yeah, and that was definitely the focus. And they did say that they're hoping to do these more along the lines of once a month, and they'll have different devs on each time. So the next one won't be so profession heavy. Don't worry, Garrett.
Cool. I don't know if you guys have noticed the pattern, but I'm not happy with professions this expansion.
I don't mind them. I love the quests. I know that there's specifically with our not archaeology. Archaeology is still dumb, but sorry.
Tell us how you really feel.
Alchemy. Specifically with alchemy, they did push you quite far into dungeons, so I didn't kind of love that. Alchemy was specifically the one that was most dungeon heavy, and they did say that in the Q&A as well. And I kind of wish they hadn't done that because I'm not a huge, random dungeon person. But
I'm not a huge fan of not making money with my professions, and you get to do that with alchemy, so I don't feel bad for you. I have the tiniest violin for alchemists in this expansion, the tiniest ever, and it's played with my middle finger.
Oh, burn.
Anyway, so let's move on to our lore segment this week because it is Monday, the 16th, and tomorrow we're getting a new raid, Jocelyn.
We are, and I'm so excited about this just because of the whole, I love the Nightfallen and the Nightborn, just their aesthetic and everything else. And I'm excited to finally just punch Ellison in her stupid face because she's done some really bad stuff, guys. If you've actually played all the way through the quest line post Exalted, she's not nice. She deserves a good punch in the face. So I'm looking forward to just kicking her butt and making it so that the Nightfallen can overthrow her terrible rule. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I haven't seen outside of a couple of boss videos for the first couple of fights because we're actually taking our first poke at the Nighthold tomorrow. I haven't seen a whole lot of the aesthetic and the layout of the raid, but just from Suramar City is already so beautiful that I can't wait to get in there and see what they have in store.
Awesome. I'm very excited for it as well. As everyone knows, as it has been well documented on this podcast, there are 2 things in this World of Warcraft that I love very, very much. One is Arthas, the ultimate man crush, and the other is night elves. And just elves in general. Honestly, my answer of what's your favorite race in Warcraft changes on a daily basis. I flip-flop between blood elves and night elves constantly. Let's just go with elves.
Yes, and there is a lot of just elves in the Rebellion storyline post-Exalted because all of your different factions come together, and we'll get to all of that very shortly. But first, we're going to basically give you a little bit of a background on Suramar. But we did cover, and so we're not really going to cover today, but we did cover the first part of the Suramar storyline, kind of on your way to Exalted. It's the Good Samaritan achievement.
Yes, it just Suramaritan.
Is it? Oh man, damn it!
Just rolls off the tongue.
Oh, I always get it wrong because I don't know, glaze over some letters or something. But the good Suramaritan achievement is basically all the quest lines on your way up to Exalted. So we actually did cover that on Embrace the Spoilers. And so you guys should go and check that out. There's a link in the show notes to that episode.
Yep.
But yeah, we're going to cover a little bit of kind of Suramar, the War of the Ancients, and the Rebellion, and then kind of go into the Nighthold and what we can expect there. So
yeah.
Garrett, do you want to? I've been talking a lot. I feel like because I'm way into professions. I feel like I've been talking a lot. You can take it away.
Yeah. So Suramar is important to the elves for a multitude of reasons, but probably the most important the thing that makes Suramar the most important is that it is the location of the Temple of Elune, and this is like the key. This is the pinnacle. This is the most important place of worship in the history of the Night Elf and the Highborn kind of society. More Night Elf, but it's located in Suramar, which is, a big location for Highborn. That is the temple that eventually becomes known as the Tomb of Sargeras. If you're following along, if you're relatively new to Warcraft lore, the Tomb of Sargeras, that big green spire that we still haven't really done anything with, but it looks cool in the distance, that used to be the Temple of Elune. That used to be a pinnacle for worship for the Night Elves. So, that being said, in broad strokes, let's talk about the history of Suramar. So, the first big kind of bullet point in the history of Suramar is its importance in the War of the Ancients. And of course, I'm going to point out that this is also the location of the Nethrazims. And if you're not sure what the Nethrazim are, they are the Dreadlords. This was the location of their experiment to create kind of their first undead army on Azeroth. And this laid the foundation for the Scourge 10,000 years later. That's right, we're in Legion. There's a freaking, Lich King, a Lich King nugget just in the main city that we're trying to do is just grind reputation in currently.
Yeah, so basically, so there was the Well of Eternity where we talked about it before, Queen Ajara. That whole city was actually Zinashari, and then so Suramar was another big center of Night Elf civilization. So it's close by, or at least it used to be before Kalimdor was split into little pieces, but they used to be fairly close by. So Suramar was under Legion attack at the same time as Zinashari was basically starting the Legion attack.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. The Legion attempted to open a second portal within the Temple of Elune. This would allow them to attack the Night Elves on two fronts if they were successful. However, the Highborn used the Pillars of Creation to close that portal, and they put several magical seals on the temple when they did that. Other important things that happened during the War of the Ancients in Suramar, one of the wild gods, Ashamain, she actually died battling the Pit Lord Ronakon, is how I'm going to choose to pronounce that. He was the Pit Lord leading the Legion's attack against Suramar City. Ashamain gave her life to buy the elves of Suramar time to create a shield around the city.
There were actually quite a few wild gods who gave their lives fighting the Legion in the War of the Ancients. So that's why you see a lot of kind of tributes to the wild gods, especially in Night Elven culture, because specifically this gigantic war, there were so many like self-sacrifices by these wild gods to help protect their world, essentially, and the kind of lesser races that they were there to protect. So there were a lot of sacrifices during the War of the Ancients by these gods. Yeah,
it was. I mean, it was. We got to see the the wild side of magic and the arcane side of magic working together within the War of the Ancients, and at the same time, it was really the beginning of the massive schism between those two forms of magic in Azeroth.
Which is actually really interesting because you mentioned the nature magic and arcane magic. They actually come back together in the story of Suramar. We saw it in questing in the first section on your way to Exalted with the planting and nurturing of the Arkandor, which is the giant tree that is essentially going to sustain the Nightfallen in Shalaron. So basically Night Elves and High Elves causing the schism between these two magics are now bringing them back together in an attempt to redeem the Nightfallen, the Nightborn.
Which means next expansion, Night Elves and Blood Elves should be able to be cross-faction races.
Yeah, right.
They did it with pandas, damn it. Anyways, so when the Great Sundering happened, at the end of the War of the Ancients, most of Suramar was actually dragged down into the depths. So that's right. What I'm telling you is that massive city we've been, running around and questing in used to be even bigger. What we see now in modern day in the Legion expansion is only a small portion of Suramar that is still standing after the Great Sundering. Including the Temple of Elune, including the Tomb of Sargeras, that actually went down into the bay there and was kind of risen much later by the original Gul'dan. And I love that I have to specify Gul'dans now. By Gul'dan 1, by OG Gul'dan, Gul'dan 1.0. Because, and the whole reason he did that was because that's where the remains of Sargeras, as we know him, of his physical embodiment on Azeroth, were basically buried by the previous guardian. Is it Aegwin? Aegwin?
Aegwin, I think.
Aegwin? Okay, I've never known how to pronounce that correctly either. But the previous guardian buried the Eye of Sargeras, his scepter, and his physical remains in the sunken temple of Elune. Which is why original Gul'dan came and rose it out of the ocean and then got himself dead inside.
Yeah, original Gul'dan was actually betrayed by the Legion. And if you haven't listened to it, there's a really cool audiobook that was put out by Blizzard at the start of Legion. And it's, I think, a 5-part series, and they're about 20 minutes each. And it's basically Gul'dan in the Tomb of Sargeras, like new Gul'dan, not original Gul'dan, but he's kind of finding out the story and facing off against Khadgar, but he's finding out the story of how he originally died and how he was actually betrayed by the Legion. And so like new Gul'dan is kind of like, WTF Legion, and he has to make this big decision about whether he's going to back the Legion or whether he's going to go off on his own because he finds out about this big betrayal. And it's a really, really interesting audio series. So if you haven't listened to it, I would very much recommend it, and you can find it on Blizzard's website.
Awesome. I also got a little bit ahead of myself. The whole reason that there's any of Suramar left is that shield. Now, if you've ventured into Suramar even a little bit, you have probably come across Thalisra, and she probably told you the story of how Suramar survived the Great Sundering, or at least what's left of it. That's because of the shield that they put around the section of Suramar that is still standing. That shield was up for 10,000 years. The High Elves inside, the Highborn, believe that the world outside was destroyed, which I'm now trying to figure out what they actually thought it looked like. If they thought that they were now basically their own little planet and there was literally nothing left, or if it was like scorched or whatever. But I love the idea that they were like, yeah, we're just this little tiny city floating through space now.
Well, basically, the majority of the land that you can see from the city is actually water. There's kind of like mountains up the one side, and then there's, the water down the other side. So I can almost kind of believe that, the idea that basically they saw what was a continent in front of them get swallowed up by the sea, and now all they can see where there used to be a continent is water. So I mean, the idea that they're just kind of floating around on an island and that it's unsafe outside, they don't know, who won, what happened. They basically just know that there's nothing left outside where there used to be a continent. So they just assume for 10,000 years that they're on their own.
Yeah.
I did.
When in reality, they should have dropped the shield, built some condos, and renamed it Florida. Except there's mountains, so maybe California instead. Yeah. Maybe that's more accurate. Also, it's a lot more possible that a chunk of California will just randomly fall into the ocean.
There you go.
I may have been freaked out when I lived there by the first pathetic earthquake I experienced.
So yes, basically we have the this dome protecting the Nightborn society, and what's essentially happened is because they have been cut off from the outside world, they become cut off from Elune, which previously is the energy that they use to sustain them. So they have been sustained by the Nightwell, which is was created by the Pillar of Creation, and they are now completely dependent on this energy. So if you don't have access to the Nightwell and you're one of the Nightborn, then you become withered, which we've talked about before. They're basically like elf zombies. They're kind of mindless.
They become Gollum. They get Gollumified.
That's a good way to think about it, actually. So they they lose their personality. One of the saddest stories, actually, in one of the zones, I'm totally blanking on the name of it now. It's the one we always start with all the night elf stuff. The one we always start in. Azuna, yes. There's a really sad storyline in Azuna where you befriend a withering Nightborn, and then at the end of the storyline, he actually withers, and it's really sad. But the whole idea of the withered is so sad.
I loved him by the end of that quest line. I was like, no, come back here. I'm just like trying to shove mana crystals into his mouth.
I know, and you have so many. I'm just like, I don't understand why we can't help you, but I guess he was too far gone.
Yeah, it made a shit. It's just a total shame. Loved that character. It was a really good quest line.
Mm-hmm. But so basically, people are being cast out now that the shield has come down. People are being cast out of the society for the smallest little kind of what do you call them?
Infraction.
Yes, infraction. Thank you.
Well, this is after a rebellion happens.
Yes, so there has been kind of there's the first rebellion, which was led by the former first Arcanist Belrissera, and I always pronounce her name wrong, so just go with it, guys. Maybe I'll just call her Miss T. The famous first Arcanist, Miss T. So she basically leads a rebellion that fails, and she's chased off into the wilderness, which is when we come across her. And she forms a new rebellion, which we help her with in the first set of Suramar questline. And so basically the whole idea is to have a new rebellion against Elisand, and using the Arkandor, which is a tree, and it's the infusion of basically nature magic and arcane magic that we were talking about. It's pulling all its energy from the ley lines, which we also activated as part of that earlier questing. It grows fruit that, when eaten by the Nightfallen, basically cures their addiction to the Nightwell, which is super cool. I wish they had something like that for the Blood Elves.
Yeah, although I kind of don't, because I like being a mana vampire.
Yeah. So those living outside the city now have a cure for their dependency. So the Rebellion questline actually takes place over 9 weeks, and that was heading into the launch of the Nighthold raid, which, as we mentioned, is happening on Tuesday. And so basically the forces of the Night Elves, the Blood Elves, and the High Elves all march on Suramar City to defeat Elisand after a horrible raid on the Waning Crescent. So the Waning Crescent was kind of the area, the quote unquote poor area of Suramar City, where a lot of its residents were on the way to withering. They were very dependent. They didn't have a lot of resources. They didn't have ready access to Arkwine or to the Nightwell. And so you were kind of in there helping to feed the hungry. And Elisand and her demons raid it and kill everybody, like everybody.
Yep.
It's awful.
Yep.
So this is when the Alliance and the Horde kind of step in. And so the three leaders, after a whole bunch of different quests to kind of prep the rebellion, the three elven leaders face Elisand's avatar, and she insults all three of them, Tyrande, Varisa, and Lady Liedrin, who's the head of the...
You did not talk smack to my Lady Liedrin.
What?
You did not talk smack to my Lady Liedrin there, Elisand.
It's actually, if you haven't seen the cinematic, it's actually really, really, really cool. It's one of my favorites. I love all of the Nightborn cinematics, but this one in particular was really great because, like we mentioned off the top of the lore segment, Garrett and I are both huge fans of elven lore in Warcraft. And this was basically Elisand talking to each individual race and saying, like, this is how you betrayed me, because all these races of elves have descended from the original Highborn and the Night Elves in one way or another. So she's basically talking to each different race of elves and saying, like, you guys all suck. Like, look at what you used to be and look at where you are now. And, you know, like, you have no right, essentially, to, you know, come to me and talk to me. And especially, and it hit home to me, being a blood elf, she was like, of all three races, you blood elves, you Sindorai, should understand the sacrifice I'm making for my people, because you guys have the same sort of dependency that we do. So come on. And it's a really, really neat scene. But basically what happens is she freezes them in time. There's a giant explosion and everyone on the bridge, all the forces of the Alliance and the Horde are trapped. So Khadgar is able to go in and free Tyrande, but the others remain trapped, and it effectively neutralizes the strength of both Alliance and Horde. So Lilith, who has been working from the inside, actually sent out some intel. We still don't know what happened to her, but it doesn't look good. The rebellion then actually locates a barrier which is protecting a hidden entrance to the Nighthold beneath Suramar City, and we are currently working to bring down that barrier. So we are about to assault the Nighthold.
Tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow.
All together now. Yeah.
I'm not singing.
I wasn't planning on it.
Oh.
Was there a song that I'm not aware of? Was there rehearsals?
Isn't there a song from like Annie or something that's like, tomorrow, tomorrow?
Oh, God, I guess so.
Something, 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 tomorrow.
That's not what I was referencing.
Oh.
But okay. I was just like, everyone's gonna pitch in and assault the night. Now this has gotten so away from me. I've never seen Annie, so I can't speak to that. Anyways, yeah. So tomorrow is the Nighthold. Fun facts about the Nighthold: it is the largest structure in the Broken Isles. It is Elisand's palace. Essentially, it is centered around the Nightwell, the font from which the Nightborn draw their energy, and the whole reason why Nightfallen have such a hang up and are basically going with they're experiencing withdrawal 24/7, more or less.
Basically.
Yeah. So think of it as it's analogous to the Sunwell. Basically, we're going after the Night Elf version of the Sunwell. This was the whole reason the Legion was even interested in Suramar again in the first place. This is why they attacked. This is why Gul'dan approached Elisand and gave her the ultimatum of, hey, let us in, help us out, let us use some of the power from the Nightwell or die. That was the ultimatum that Elisand was given, which almost gives her an out. She's still a terrible, terrible character in Warcraft.
Yeah, she's pretty heartless.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So we're gonna kick down the front door of her house and trash the place. I'm looking forward to it. I also just want to see the inside of this place. I'm sure it's gorgeous.
Well, and that's kind of the idea. So we're kind of going in through the basement. So we're gonna see some sort of like I think the first boss that I saw was like a giant scorpion made of crystal. Like he's super cool looking, but you're basically like going in through the bottom, and I'm sure it's gonna get progressively more and more like decadent as you rise to the top, because eventually you are going to defeat her. But she is not the final boss. We finally get to punch Gul'dan in his stupid face.
Well, we did last expansion. But we're going to do it again.
Yeah.
Apparently, you think we'll kill him?
Hopefully for good this time.
Do you think we'll kill him?
Yeah, I think this is the end of Gul'dan, personally.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
We'll see. I guess.
Unless he's going to be in the Tomb of Sargeras, because I guess that's still a thing.
That is very
but
much still a thing.
I do think that we are in Legion. We are going to kill Gul'dan. That this is the end of Gul'dan's story. I think this is the end of the Burning Legion story. This is it. So.
Until Back to the Future Part 2, where we deal with old Gul'dan and the Sports Almanac.
Damn it.
Yeah. I'm very curious to see what's going to be happening. So yeah, Elisand is the second to last boss. Gul'dan is the final boss. And that's what we're going to be doing in Nighthold. I'm excited. I'm very excited for Nighthold because I just want to see more. Like I said, like I wasn't joking when I was like, it looks pretty inside. I want to see more of this elven architecture. That being said, I'm really excited for the Tomb of Sargeras. Like their pitch for that raid at BlizzCon was awesome, and all they had to show us was like a really, really light on details, like skeletal map of the layout of this raid. And I'm just from their kind of verbal pitch, I'm very excited about the next raid.
Yeah, I'm just personally, I'm a little bit burnt out on the Emerald Nightmare. I'm burnt out on Malfurion and that whole thing. And I think that it's setting up some really cool stuff for future expansions and future story content. But I'm just sick of Malfurion. He's so whiny. I'm ready to move on, and I'm ready for a new aesthetic. And I think I mentioned a couple times, if not on this show, at least on Embrace of Spoilers, I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetic of the Nightmare. Everything's just all black and red, and it's just kind of like skinned over top of the cool night elf stuff. So I'm not a huge fan of the Nightmare aesthetic in general. So I'm glad that we're moving on from that. I'm ready for a new raid. Trial of Valor was a really cool kind of set piece in between these two. It gave us some really cool story too. Helya was an awesome final boss, although really kind of chaotic, but still. I loved fighting Helya in both in the dungeon and in the raid. I think she was a cool, super cool boss with all her tentacles everywhere and her like Cavaldir and just everything that was Helya. I think was really well done. But it was so short and it was so like tacked on to the end that I'm ready for a whole big new set piece of a big next raid. So I think Nighthold's going to be a lot of fun, and I'll give you my first impressions next week, I guess, because we're going to go poke at it tomorrow night.
I thoroughly enjoyed the Nightmare. I thought it was really cool, but I mean that's aesthetics, right? To each their own. Some things land for some people, some things don't. I hope you like black and green, because there's going to be a lot of it in the next raid.
Yeah, which again, I know that the next raid's going to be very black and green, which again is why I think I'm really excited about this specific one, because it's very, purpley, pinky, bluey, shiny, elven stuff. It's going to be a very pretty raid. Yeah. As opposed to, we've had a lot of really kind of ugly raid set pieces lately. So I'm excited to have a little bit of the pretty.
I've been very happy with the raid progression so far in this expansion. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed Nightmare. It's definitely long in the tooth, but that's going to happen with any raid. I loved Trial. I thought that was fantastic. It was a good small raid, and I'm very excited for the Nighthold. And I think the schedule's been pretty darn good.
I agree. I'm at the point where I'm ready to progress. I've got, the gear to progress, and I'm ready to move forward, and I'm tired of the aesthetic, but I don't feel as sick of it as I was sick of stuff in Draenor. So this is it's good. It is very good pacing so far, I think. Yeah. And we should also mention, if you are excited about the Nighthold, you get the same level of gear from LFR Nighthold that you would get from normal Emerald Nightmare. So there is really no reason to be raiding Emerald Nightmare anymore, unless you're looking for achievements or very specific pieces of gear. But just power level wise, you're going to get the same stuff from LFR. So it's time to move on.
Let's do it.
Kick Gul'dan and Elysion in their stupid phases.
Yeah, very excited. Yeah. Well, let's move on to some emails and then wrap this up. You can send your emails to our new email address. We have FAZpodcast@gmail.com, FAZpodcast@gmail.com, same as our Twitter, @FAZpodcast. Hachikumo writes in. He's also chilling in the chat room. I see you in there. He says, what do you guys think of a Mean Streets of Gadgetzan battleground in WoW? All right. A lot of Hearthstone references coming. You've been warned, everyone. It is a factionless battleground where you automatically join the group of your class. So Warrior, Hunter, Paladin, and Death Knight. Okay, you're already retrofitting here to serve your purpose here, sir. Get to follow Don Honcho's orders. Rogue, Shaman, and Druid, and Monk have Aya Blackpaw. Mage, Warlock, Priest, and Demon Hunters are with Kazakus. In my initial thought, it is similar to Wrathy Basin where you have points of interest to capture. However, the 3 bosses move around the map and buff players near them. If you can defeat a boss, then their group would lose points. A 3-way battle sounds complicated, but just pure fun to me. I will say the conclusion for you guys on this thought, balancing this will be hard. Yeah, I'm okay. We're done. We're done here. Balancing this would be extremely difficult.
Well, but see, and this is what I think is key about this email. I think this is a great idea for what they're coming up with, the whole brawl idea. Because they literally said when they're doing brawls in World of Warcraft, they're going to be new reimaginings of PvP ideas, and they are not meant to be balanced. So I love the idea of a 3-way battle. I love the idea of, being tied to a certain faction, because we've talked about how we want to see basically the changes in the lore in Mean Streets of Gadgetzan in Hearthstone. We would love to see that in Warcraft, because the idea of Gadgetzan and the way that it's kind of flourished post-Cataclysm I think it would be amazing to see that in Warcraft. So throw that into a PvP battleground where it's, these different factions based not on whether you're Horde or Alliance, but whether you're a Hunter, Warrior, Paladin. They've so doubled down on just classes in general that I think this would be a perfect fit for PvP brawls in Legion. I think this is awesome. I want to see this so much.
Yeah, I would too. I think it has to be a fun thing, though. I think there's no way you make a properly balanced battleground out of this.
No, it's definitely, it fits brawls. It doesn't fit like the normal rotation of battlegrounds, but it definitely fits the whole idea of PvP brawls, which I believe are coming in 7.2. So I know obviously we're not going to get mean streaks of Gadgetzan in 7.2, but it would be really, really cool. And I hope that, I don't know, I feel like we need to write in, Hachikumo, you need to write in, we need to tweet Warcraft devs. We have to be like, dudes, here's the idea. Make it happen.
I just really want to see that version of Gadgetzan in game. I don't care how it happens, whether it's a battleground or not. I want to see Gadgetzan updated to reflect Hearthstone's version of it. Sounds wonderful. Who's our final email from?
This one comes to us from Sandra. It says, hello, fellow Azerothians. My name is Sandra, no last name given. And I main a Pandaren, Beastmaster Hunter, Horde, of course. I enjoy your show so much that I listened to all of your castle making cookies over the Christmas break while my mother-in-law gave me backwards glances. Your podcast is so well done that after a week I had her asking me questions about the game and almost got her to create a character. My mother is a Blood Elf Pally, by the way, so WoW runs strong among us. My question pertains to Mythic Dungeons and their role in quest lines of this expansion. I've been playing WoW since Mid-Cata and have casually raided since Siege of Orgrimmar. I enjoy raiding and the experience it provides, as well as the extended story that you discover, such as Archimonde showing up at the end of Hellfire Citadel. But raiding never felt as though it was absolutely necessary to complete questing zone storylines. I've recently gotten to the point in the Suramar questline where you are required to complete the Archway and Court of Stars dungeons. I wasn't overly concerned until I found out that these two dungeons are mythic only, meaning I have to make a group or find one through the pre-made group finder, Shudder. As Beastmaster Hunters have taken a massive hit in the DPS charts, I find it hard to find a group that will go with me. I know I should swap to Marksman, but I'm almost done with my artifact. I understand. On top of the annoying achievements and eye levels that these groups require, I'm at 856. It's really giving me gamer anxiety, and I'm not sure how I feel about the whole thing. I like the idea of Mythic Dungeons for those who need a harder mode, but to require it for a main quest line is rather frustrating. What do you think? Should they have made a heroic mode for these dungeons for the quest line? I know Kara is being split and made into heroic, but I've not heard anything on whether these will get a different mode as well. Loktar Ogar, and peace be with you to my Lorewalker friends. So these dungeons are specifically being made heroic as well, so you will be able to queue for them in 7.2. But I do agree that putting a set of content like Archway and Court of Stars that are mythic only right smack dab in the middle of a zone storyline is a little bit off-putting and not a decision I think that I would have made had I been on the Warcraft design team. What about you, Garrett?
To quote a friend of mine who I can't remember the name of, it's stupid, stupid, stupid.
I don't know where you would have gotten that quote from, Garrett.
No idea.
That doesn't sound like anyone I know.
No clue whatsoever. No, it's just dumb. I mean, I don't care. I have no issue doing mythics. I'm pretty well geared. No one's like, a Blood Death Knight, you can't tank for us. No one gives a crap. It's very easy for me to find a group. But I still think it's dumb and annoying, and you're absolutely right. Like, just let me see the story. Let me see the damn story.
Yeah, and I think the difference for us is, not only do we have AIE, because that's the guild that we're a part of, and they're very, very active, but we also have a very active group of friends that we've met through, there's just the Frog Pants Network in general. And I mean, anytime that I log in, I've got a good 5 to 10 people who are also online doing stuff in Warcraft at the same time I am, who all have max level characters. So if I ever need to run a mythic, I can usually just ping my friends and we're good to go. And even if I can't ping my friends, I can ping my guild. So I haven't actually had to use the group finder to do mythic, and I know that I am a very fortunate person in that regard. But I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you that not having a kind of random dungeon finder heroic version, I think, was a big misstep.
Yep, agreed, 100%.
I'm even totally okay, actually, with Archway and Court of Stars being locked behind rep. I think that was fine, that you should be kind of progressing through a storyline and however they're going to gate it, even if it was just like quest gating, the idea that those dungeons aren't open to you until you kind of discover them and open them up, and that little bit of like mini attunement, I guess, I'm totally fine with. I think that is good gating and good storytelling. But I think that the way that they did it with like rep and stuff and then difficulty on top of that, I don't think that was a great choice.
Yeah, no, completely agree. One or the other, mythic only, but not gated by rep, or just make it gated by rep, and then anyone can go and do it once it gets to that point.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I mean, you are in luck because, as we said, as I believe 7.2, all this stuff is getting heroic difficulties. Kara is being split, and you will be able to queue into it. So you should be set and good to go in 7.2, which is coming again soon. TM, we don't actually have a release date on 7.2, but 7.2 is actually the Tomb of Sargeras, which is the next raid tier. So it's a few months off, anyways, because we only just are getting Nighthold tomorrow. So.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget, we have a Twitter now. We have an email. It is at FAZpodcast. And if you want to send us an email, it's FAZpodcast@gmail.com. That's FAZpodcast. And don't forget about our giveaway for Fell Kitties. Thanks again to the anonymous listener for donating those Fell Kitties. Follow at FAZpodcast and tweet us your favorite Warcraft character tagged with #FellCatnip for a chance to win. So thank you for that. Thank you for the iTunes reviews, everyone. Keep them coming. If you're listening on iTunes and you like the show and you haven't dropped us a 5-star review yet, we'd really appreciate it if you went over there and did so. Thank you on this episode to Uncanny GRC, who said simply lore is fun. And
I agree.
Orpflog, who I just love the name of. It's fantastic.
That is a pretty great name.
Yep. You can go and subscribe to For Azeroth on iTunes, over at youtube.com/amovetv, or really just about anywhere else that podcast can be found. Catch us Mondays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/amovetv or on alphageekmedia.com. But Jocelyn, when you're not doing this, where can folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Twitch at JossPlays, or you can find me on twitch.tv/amovetv every Wednesday night for my general gaming podcast called The Gamers Inn at 8 p.m. Eastern. Fantastic.
Folks, you can find me on Twitter at GarrettArt. Every podcast I do, including this one and other shows with Jocelyn Moffett, can be found over at amove.tv. Check out my solo show, The Angry Nerd. That's the one I'll pimp. It's amove.tv/Angry Nerd if you want a website. Otherwise, just look it up anywhere podcasts can be found. It's my solo show, me talking to myself. It's a good one-sided conversation until I take emails from you guys, which does happen. So, anywho, that's going to do it for this show. Until next time, good luck and have fun.
Faz!
I was stopped recording.